Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Will. After going over the multiple origins of Skeletor and Orko, I think we can do one more character, don't you? But this time we're gonna look into a character who brings about your greatest fear. Let's look into the multiple origins of Scareglow. Let's get to it.
Hello guys! Today I woke up and chose to play with fire, because today I am going to talk about the origins of Scareglow. Scareglow has been haunting Masters of the Universe fans since 1987, and not just because he glows in the dark. In almost 4 decades, nobody, not Mattel, not any writer, not any showrunner, has ever given a straight answer to the most basic question about him. Who exactly is he? Is he Skeletor's ghost from the future? Is he a magical construct conjured in Skeletor's own image? Every official source says something different. Every answer is technically correct, and none of them agree with each other. I know it sounds weird, but trust me, today we are going through every single continuity to lay out what we actually know, what is genuinely unresolved, and why the mystery might be the most interesting thing about this character. Let's get to it. Who is Scareglow? In general, Scareglow serves Skeletor, the main antagonist of the Masters of the Universe. However, in 1986, during the conceptual stage, Scareglow's action figure packaging was labeled as Evil Ghost of Skeletor, as he featured with a scythe, a purple cape, and a skull face, just like Skeletor. Every different version of him gave us a different answer about his origin, instead of sticking with a common one. So let's check out the first one.
Terrify you.
The 1987 Mattel Style Guide, the Official Origins. The first trace of Scareglow's origin didn't come from any comics, animation series, or movies. In fact, Scareglow never appeared in the original 83 to 85 animated series. As I said, he was conceptualized in 1986. His only appearance in an MOTU animated series came out in 2021's Netflix Masters of the Universe Revelation. So, where did the seeds of his origin come from? The closest I can say is the 87 Mattel Style Guide. The guide was an internal document that provided character descriptions to licensees, comics publishers, toy catalog writers, and promotional material producers. The description for Scareglow was, Skeletor conjured up the spirit in his own image to frighten travelers on the pathways of Eternia. Scareglow is invisible during the daylight, but glows at night. So, what can this tell us? Scareglow never existed. Skeletor created him. He was Skeletor's own image. Therefore, the skull face and body, right? He was invisible during the day, powerful at night with high stealth abilities. But it also keeps a few things unanswered, such as whether Scareglow was a ghost who looked like Skeletor or just his spirit, which he made to obey his commands. Another thing that the description didn't make clear was whether Scareglow had his own consciousness, free will, or independence. In short, did he have any purpose beyond serving Skeletor, even though there were gaps to be filled? But UK Adventure magazine and, partially, the Star Comics picked up the source of the character from the guide and incorporated it into their storyline. But later, the mini-comic released with the action figure presented an entirely new story arc. The Search for Keldor mini-comics, 1987. First appearance, most famous ambiguity. Well, this is the origin of Scareglow that most of the fans know, if they have read this mini-comic. Scareglow first appeared in The Search for Keldor mini-comic, and if you're an 80s or 90s kid, then you know that the Masters of the Universe storyline had the same old template. Skeletor devises a cunning ploy to take control of Eternia, then sends his minions to execute his plan. They fail miserably and get their asses kicked. The plot of this chapter was no different. King Randor and Sorceress plan to travel between dimensions to find Randor's long-lost brother, Keldor, who vanished while trying to master his magic. As usual, Skeletor wanted to disrupt their plans because the secret of Keldor's fate would have destroyed him. So with his powers, he summoned the most evil beings from space and time, and those were Ninjor and Scareglow. Ninjor and Scareglow travel to Eternia and finds Prince Adam and Clampchamp guarding Eternia in the king's absence. Remember, I told you that Scareglow has a power to induce fear and paralysis earlier. So, when Prince Adam confronted Scareglow, Scareglow used his fear-inducing glow with full power and stopped Adam from transforming into He-Man. Just a quick note, Scareglow will use this power in another storyline once again, so pay attention and comment down where you spot it again. Now, back to the plot. Luckily, Clampchamp threw Ninjor at Scareglow, and his powers stopped, and finally, Adam transformed into He-Man and made them bite the dust. Even though He-Man was victorious, due to a time crunch, King Randor had to return to his dimension, and the secret of Keldor survived for another year, as the veil between the dimensions only weakened once a year. Now, coming to the key highlights about Scareglow that got skipped in the plot. When Skeletor summoned Scareglow, he said that he was the ghost of Skeletor. This was the first time the character revealed something about himself. This time it had nothing to do with a packaging copy or the writer's description. Skeletor summoned Scareglow from a specific point in time, which suggests that he could be Skeletor's ghost from the future. This reinforces the idea that Scareglow may be a spiritual extension of Skeletor. UK Masters of the Universe Adventure Magazine. As I said earlier, the UK Adventure Magazine picked up a few things from the Mattel style guide for the Scareglow origin and presented him in their 11th issue in a story titled Enter the Ninjor. Even though Scareglow had the DNA from the Mattel style guide, the Adventure Magazine gave it its own spin. Here, they have shown that Scareglow was a creation of Skeletor. He was a creature made of pure light energy, and Skeletor created him using his own image. Then, Scareglow was sent with Ninjor to attack He-Man and Fisto as they were exploring Viper Tower. You might not find much of a difference in the origins with the guide brief, but this was the cleanest version that showcased Skeletor made Scareglow without any ambiguity. And the UK Adventure Magazine ran all of its stories for the British readers throughout the mid to late 1980s. So now you can see 3 different sources from the same era, each making different claims about the same character. Marvel Star Comics Masters of the Universe series. Marvel Star Comics published their own standalone stories throughout the 1980s, and in one of them, Scareglow appeared. In issue number 7, Scareglow's origins had a similar backdrop to the mini-comic setup. In the main plot, Skeletor once again devised a plan to take Eternia, and this time, he applied divide and rule policy. He summoned Ninjor, Scareglow, and Blast attacked to wreak havoc in Eternia. Scareglow played a crucial part. He lured Prince Adam towards him, leaving King Randor behind with only Clampchamp guarding him. But when Adam realized that Scareglow was not Skeletor, he understood the deceit and quickly returned to his father, and the Masters defeated all of Skeletor's minions. Even though the plot sounded repetitive, the strangest thing was that Scareglow was described as Skeletor's ghostly double. If my understanding is correct, a double essentially aligns with a copy or a reflection. So here, Scareglow is just a reflection of Skeletor, a mere imitation, not a creation like the UK Adventure. Not his ghostly self from the future like the mini-comic. And the strangest thing is that Star Comics storylines are considered lower canon than the mini-comics or the 2002 animated series, but the character descriptions are reviewed by Mattel. And if this phrase, ghostly double, has been greenlit by Mattel, then it is another discontinuity in the origins of Scareglow. MV Creations Halloween Special, The Power of Fear, 2003. To be honest, Scareglow never appeared in the main 2002 animated series or its accompanying MV Creations ongoing comic run, but he did appear in a special one-off Halloween comic in 2003. This comic was specially given to the children affected by AIDS Foundation, CAAF, fundraiser, and even got sold in a few comic shops. If we go by the plot, then Skeletor summoned Scareglow to defeat He-Man and his friends, but this time, Scareglow was summoned from an alien dimension, where he was the ruler. Being the ruler, Scareglow had this power to detect his enemies' deepest fears and make them experience that to such an extent that they become paralyzed to counter back. When Scareglow was summoned, he didn't want to serve Skeletor, and this was the first instance where he denied serving Skeletor, so he demanded to return to his dimension. But Skeletor refused, and then Scareglow used his fear powers on Skeletor, but it had no effect, as Skeletor had no fear. And Skeletor struck Scareglow with his Havoc Staff and ordered him to defeat He-Man and his friends in exchange for returning to his home dimension. We are talking about Scareglow here, but we also see the full extent of Skeletor's strength, who easily cracks down a potent psychic ability. Anyways, Scareglow battled against He-Man and his friends, and for a moment, all of them fall prey to Scareglow's abilities, experienced their deepest fears, and struggled against them. But Orko neutralized Scareglow's effect, and once the fear wore off, they easily defeated Scareglow. The defeated Scareglow pleaded with Skeletor to return to his realm, but Skeletor refused and ordered him to stay as his servant, which Scareglow took with a pinch of salt and vowed to defeat Skeletor once he discovered his biggest fear. And as you know, being from an alien dimension and opposing Skeletor became the two things that made this another origin story for Scareglow. MOTU Classics Toyline Bio, Karak Null, the Bounty Hunter. When Mattel released the Scareglow figure in the MOTU Classics collector's line, they chose to give Scareglow a proper origin story, without any ambiguity, and then came the Karak Null toy packaging bio. The bio said that his name before death was Karak Null. He was a shifty bounty hunter who had spent years attempting to break into Castle Grayskull, as he was obsessed with the legends that it contained the power to be the master of the universe. But after death, he was cursed and banished to the dimensions of Infinita and was forever chained for crimes. It was Skeletor, with his magical spell of light, who founded Karak Null and brought him to Eternia. Skeletor wanted to locate the most evil warriors across 5 dimensions to rule Eternia, and Null was one of them. With the power of Scythe of Doom, Null agreed to serve Skeletor and was reborn as Scareglow. This name was given because he could burst forth and freeze enemies with fright. Then the storyline continued as to what Scareglow did while He-Man and Skeletor were both away on the distant planet of Primus. He convened a supernatural cabal on Eternia, consisting of the mummy Rat Trap, the witch Sultra, the vampire Crimson Countess, and the wraith-like creature Dark Dream. And together, they collected 7 evil artifacts. This storyline was set up, but never followed through in any other media. Now, what did this storyline do with the ever-changing identity of Scareglow? For the first time, Scareglow was presented as a separate entity, outside of Skeletor's shadow. In this continuity, he was not a ghost, not a construct, nor even a future version of Skeletor. He was just a cursed, dead bounty hunter back from another dimension. Even the name, Karak Null, doesn't appear in any comic, animated series, or other toy line.
The fury of Grayskull.
Masters of the Universe, Revelation, Netflix 2021, first animated appearance ever. This section is special because Netflix's Masters of the Universe Revelation serves as the first animated appearance for Scareglow. After 35 years, Scareglow finally appeared on the screen in full swing. He appeared in Season 1, Episode 4, which was titled Land of the Dead, and he was voiced by the legendary Tony Todd. In this episode, Scareglow was presented as the Lord of the Dead and the ruler of Subternia, a realm which many Eternians consider to be a hell, where visitors' greatest fears are given form, and those who linger too long risk being trapped forever. Even centuries ago, King Grayskull was forced to strike a deal with Scareglow for a rare ore that forged the Sword of Power, but one half of the sword was under Scareglow's possession. Sometime later, magic in Eternia began to fade, which pushed Eternia to the brink of destruction, and only the other half of the sword would have saved it. So, in a bid to save their world, He-Man and his friends traveled to Subternia to retrieve the other half of the sword. The moment they entered, Scareglow separated the group and trapped each member in an illusion of their deepest fears. Teela faced Scareglow directly. He offered her a deal to show her fear, In exchange for the sword, he conjured a sinister false version of He-Man to fight her, forcing her to confront her feelings of abandonment and betrayal. When that failed, the illusion transformed into a dark version of Teela herself. Teela overcame the illusion and broke Scareglow's hold. She reclaimed the other half of the sword. Scareglow was not done. As the group escaped through Evil Lynn's portal, he unleashed his full power to kill them. Orko stayed behind to hold him off, sacrificing himself so the others could escape. But what was the best thing about this episode was how they treated Scareglow. Kevin Smith's revelation gave another new origin for Scareglow, who was a ruler of yet another dimension and had no association with Skeletor. This was confirmed when Teela asked about Skeletor. Scareglow responded with an eerie detachment, calling him a name he hasn't heard for some time, and referring to himself only as the shadow of a ruler. And then Tony Todd delivered a deep, eerie voice that made Scareglow feel less like a character and more like a presence. The background music adds to the creepy vibe, and visually, the design moves away from a simple skeleton to something much darker. Blackness with glowing bones, like a void wearing a corpse. However, the series was not free from ambiguities, such as, is he Skeletor's distant forgotten future, or a ghost who's lingered in Subternia so long he's lost his own name? The series refused to provide any clarity on this. The debate. Okay guys, now let's sum up everything before we reach the conclusion. Was Scareglow Skeletor? The mini-comic declared that Skeletor and Scareglow are the same with "I am the ghost of Skeletor" dialogue. Add to that the fact that Skeletor summoned him from time and space, not just distant realms. Even his very design whispered the truth, a skeletal form eerily mirroring Skeletor himself, as if death stripped him down to his purest essence. And then there's the search for Keldor. A story about who Skeletor was introduces Scareglow, a figure who might represent who he becomes. Past and future revealed in the same breath. Some fans even point to an old, unofficial claim from a former Mattel insider that Scareglow was a shadow of Skeletor's own mind, destined to take form after his death, as if the character has always been haunting his own fate. But then, the other side dismantles it just as convincingly. The 1987 Mattel Style Guide, arguably the closest thing to canon, stated clearly that Skeletor created Scareglow, conjuring him in his own image, and that changes everything, because you cannot summon your own ghost before you've died. That version painted Scareglow not as a destiny, but as a weapon design, not a future self. Even the original figure's designer, David Wolfram, supported this interpretation, describing him as a conjured entity that merely resembled Skeletor. Later continuities move even further away. The 2010 Classics line reimagines him as Karak Null, a completely separate being, while Revelation subtly distances the idea altogether, having Scareglow call himself only the shadow of a ruler, not the ghost of Skeletor. So, where does that leave us? Honestly, caught between two truths. One where Scareglow is the inevitable end of Skeletor, a ghost waiting in the future, and one where he is nothing more than a reflection brought to life. If you consider my honest opinion, the answers depend on what you're looking for. Both sources are official. Both tell different truths, and neither one fully cancels the other one out. In the end, Scareglow exists in that perfect, unsettling space between definition and doubt, where the mystery isn't a flaw, it's the entire point. And maybe that's exactly the point. Anyways, Scareglow existed for nearly 4 decades without a definitive origin, and fans still enjoy this character, irrespective of the irregularities in the origins. Well, that's the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your take on this debate in the comment section down below, and also share which origin story you like the most. And if you like the overall video, share it with your friends and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more lore breakdowns. Till next time.